So for the next couple of weeks, as I mentioned, I would be in and out of my body, and they still didn't know what was wrong with me. And they were doing all these tests and they were drilling for bone marrow, and I would just leave my body at will. And I would go, and I live here in Waikiki, and I would go and hang out over the ocean while they were drilling for bone marrow to see if I had leukemia. And then this was really hard on my sisters who had come. And again, I experienced this extreme forgiveness. And that one of the sisters that came, I hadn't been talking to her for quite a while, and we'd had some disagreements and falling out. And when she showed up, it was as if none of that mattered. It had been like all washed away, because I was able to see the 360 view and understand what was going on. And for me, it was so amazing, because as I'm in and out of my body, I'm getting more and more of these views of what's real. And so anyway, so my sisters, they couldn't handle, as you can imagine, watching their brother die, who, there was a, I don't know, 90% chance, 90% chance that I was not leaving the ICU, alive. And they went and they got rid of everything in my apartment, pretty much threw away everything. And we were saying our last goodbyes. And of course, I wasn't saying anything because I was on the ventilator. But so as they would leave, my one sister would go to the coffee carts, and then she would call her husband. So I would leave my body and I would follow her to the coffee cart and watch her as she was doing her thing there. And then the other sister would go to the cafeteria, and she would go and eat egg salad. And so I would go and watch her while she was doing what she was doing. And I had this amazing love and connection with the other side, but I also desperately wanted to stay. As much as I wanted to be with my mother and my nephew on the other side, I also knew that I had things to do in this life that I hadn't done. So, like the time before, I was somewhat begging and pleading, but I didn't know if I was going to be allowed to stay or not. At some point, I had signed all the paperwork so that they weren't going to keep me on life support forever. So, so that I wasn't a burden to my family and everything, I signed all the paperwork that they weren't going to keep me on life support forever. So there came a time where they needed to take me off the ventilator and basically either he can swim, breathe or not. And the only thing they could possibly do if I wasn't able to breathe when they took me off the ventilator was a tracheotomy. As they got ready to remove me from the ventilator, my nephew, I had a nephew that I was very close with, and he had passed from cystic fibrosis in 2009. And I was very, very close with this nephew. And as they were and I hadn't seen him yet. It was really interesting. It was my mom and some other family members that I saw, but I hadn't seen my nephew yet. And all of a sudden I saw my nephew. He was at the end of the bed. And as they're getting ready to pull the ventilator out, the tube, he was at the end of the bed, elevated above me. And he puffs up his chest, and he's showing me to do what he's doing. And so, of course, I'm laying there, I'm trying to puff up my chest. And as he's showing me that he's puffing up his chest, and they're pulling the tube out, and as the tube comes out, all of a sudden, my nephew breathed into me from the other side. as he's showing me to puff up my chest and to inhale. And as I'm inhaling, he's breathing into me from the other side. And I could breathe. And this was the first time, literally in months, that I could breathe. I couldn't maintain the saturation, so they had to put on an oxygen mask, but I could breathe. And the feeling of not having breathed in several months was absolutely, I can't even describe. And so shortly thereafter, or around that time, is when it was clear that I was allowed to stay, but there's no guarantees of how long I can stay. And again, I heard this song on the ICU by Daniel Goki, Tell Your Heart to Beat Again. And I was once reminded that in this song, it says, you're shattered like you've never been before. The life you knew is like 1,000 pieces on the floor. And I was once again reminded that everything that had happened in the past, from childhood, everything, none of it mattered. That I'm getting literally a second chance, a chance to do it again. And for me, it was like a rebirth. Like literally, I had gone through this process of all these false beliefs and investing in this material, illusionary world. And I got to see that none of it was true. None of it meant anything. And that I'm getting a second chance. And I was kept being told to just let go of that old life. None of it matters. And tell your heart to beat again. Close your eyes and breathe it in. Let the shadows fall away. Step into the light of grace is what I was hearing in this song. So I had to stay in the ICU for another several weeks because I needed to be able to maintain this oxygen saturation. So I still couldn't eat. And at some point, I was able to maintain saturation levels enough. It needs to be above 82. And then I got to be moved into a new hospital, a regular hospital room. However, because I had no immune system, my lungs were shot, they had collapsed, they didn't know if they were going to rebuild themselves. I had no red blood cells, I had no white blood cells. I had this thing, I think they call it neutropenia, one of the many things that I had. And so people had to wear masks around me, and I couldn't have flowers in the room. This was when I started experiencing the first of what many angelic experiences that I couldn't tell if they were in a body or not. So one example was a janitor. Just, in this world, in this life, we judge different people. And I had this janitor that comes in my room, and it was this connection that was immediate. And he asked if he could give me a blessing. And I love blessings. I'd had the Mormon missionaries there. I'd had every religion, every pastor that I could get to give me blessings. And so of course I was welcome this. And so he pulls the curtain closed, and all of a sudden he's not a janitor anymore. He's like a living angel, and he's giving me blessings that is directly from God through him to me. I started having many experiences like that throughout the hospital time that I will never forget. So I still was having trouble breathing on my own. I wasn't able to eat on my own. I couldn't sit up on my own. I could not walk. And I had to start either I was going to end up in a care facility for people like in a vegetated state that couldn't do anything, or I needed to be able to walk again and do these things again. And if I could end up at a rehab facility. So I immediately started doing everything I could, and I had amazing doctors and physical therapy and occupational therapy people, and they immediately literally started teaching me how to sit up, how to turn, how to put my legs on the floor. And this was a process. It wasn't like, fast. And how to stand up, how to then walk. And I had this experience where I'd finally, and I was so proud, and I think my sisters had already, gone, but I was so proud that I was able to stand up, and I was able to walk a little bit. And so I had nurses and aides on each side, and they, the oxygen and all the equipment. And I was walking down the, towards the hallway. And all of a sudden I left my body again. And I am back behind my body, watching again this body that was not me, but it was me, that's coming back alive, coming to life. And to watch it walking, I mean, one of the thoughts that I had, like, who's running that body? Because and again, this intense love and compassion for this body that I hate to use the word, but it's kind of all these false beliefs had let that body die. And I had diagnosis and so forth, but so much had to do with these false beliefs, and that I was finally getting to see myself through this compassionate lens, and again, as God saw me. So it took another couple of weeks, and I was getting ready to maybe I'm going to make it to this rehab facility and not have to go to a care facility. Because if I went to a care facility, that's it. Like, there's no recovery. So I was getting excited, doing everything I could. And then there was some setbacks, and I started bleeding. And there was some concern about some different stuff. Well, that janitor came back again, asked if we could pray again, and for him to give me a blessing. So we started praying, and again, he, pulled the curtain so nobody else could see, because I'm pretty sure he would lose his job. Like, I don't think janitors are supposed to be doing this. Well, we did this blessing, and he said, there's going to be a bed open up for you at the rehab facility. And it's going to open up within the next 4 to 6 hours, he said. And sure enough, within, I think it was like 2 to 3 hours, we got notification there was a bed opening up in the rehab facility, and they had accepted me. So I got ready to later that day to go to the rehab facility, and they sent a medical transport, basically an ambulance, and put me in the ambulance, and I'm in the wheelchair and strapped in, and we're leaving the hospital on the way to the rehab hospital. Well, the guy driving, the EMT driving the medical transport, turns on the radio. And guess what's playing on the radio? Yesterday's a closing door. You don't live there anymore. Say goodbye to where you've been. Tell your heart to beat again. I texted my sisters, and I'm like, that song is playing again in this medical transport. And so we got to the facility, and I was there for a few weeks and relearning all this stuff. And again, many more of these blessing kind of experiences. But every once in a while, the song would play again. You know, tell your heart to beat again. Yesterday's a closing door. You don't live there anymore. So at some point I got to go to the rehab, or I got to leave the rehab facility and go home. I'd not been home in my house for 3 months, and got to spend the weekend at home. And the next Monday, I was supposed to go to outpatient physical therapy at the hospital. So the next Monday, I get up, I go down to the lobby. There's a medical transport there waiting to take me to the hospital for physical therapy. And the door is open, and guess what's playing? Same song. Say goodbye to where you've been, tell your heart to beat again. And of course, I texted my sisters again. There's the song again. I then ended up spending, I was still really in bad shape, so I wasn't able to do outpatient physical therapy. So I had, they started coming to me. And for the next a year or two, well, 1 year, I had inpatient or in-home physical therapy and occupational therapy. And throughout that time, I would do everything I could because I was on a walker. I was still very physically challenged. And yet my mom was now with me every day. I also had several others that were with me that had crossed over, which I started just calling the gang, because sometimes it was hard to know who was sending me messages. And except I had this grandmother, my dad's mom, that I hadn't seen in the ICU. So I'm there, and literally every day, I can't even express the gratitude and appreciation every day for life, because I still didn't know that I was gonna get, I mean, none of us really do, but in my case, it was day by day. We don't know. And so every night I would just literally, if I loved somebody, if I expressed love, if I made somebody's life better, that was all I needed to do for that day. And of course, try to get off my walker and try to rebuild, because my whole body had shut down to die. Anyway, I was sitting there, laying there one night, and all of a sudden this grandma that was not in the ICU shows up. And I immediately got nervous because I knew that I was really lucky that I had survived and that I was given this second chance. But I thought for a minute, maybe I was on, I got to say my goodbyes, learned some lessons, and now it's time to go. So I was really nervous. And I actually asked her, why are you here? And she said to me, can't I just love you? I'm just here to love you. That's all I'm here for. Just let me love you. So I had that experience, and I had this other one that I still don't completely understand, where I had to go back to the doctor, and they had done all the lab results, and it was all exciting. Things were getting better. My lungs were clearing up more. My blood cells were coming back. And I got home after the doctor and had this great day. And all of a sudden I started feeling sick. The fever was coming. My body was crashing. And I knew that feeling. And I started to get really scared. And all of a sudden, my mom, I heard her voice as loud, and it was commanding. And she said, he's had enough. And it was so authoritative. And I still don't know what that meant. I remember thinking, what's going on up there? Are they what's going on? Well, within an hour to an hour and a half, my fever went away. Everything went away. And once again, I was able to see and experience the healing power from the other side that is available to us at all times. And I had this walker again that I was trying to get off of. And so what I would do in between physical therapy and occupational therapy, I would go up and down the hallways or the hallway in my building. And so I would try to carry the walker and then do it as far as I could and then use it. Well, I was doing this and I wore myself out, and all of a sudden I was about to collapse. And as I started tilting to go down, all of a sudden I felt my mother again. She grabbed my shoulders and tilted me back up. So I kept having experiences like this. I really started to realize that my NDE, and of course this song that kept playing, that it was more of a rebirth, and that it had been there was a confirmation of a life of trial by fire, and that I had to learn all of these difficult lessons and experience all of this trauma so that I could actually learn that none of it was true. And what I was slowly learning, the only thing that is true is love, and that we have this amazing love available to us from God, and the other ones that love us on the other side. And it's us and our false beliefs that keep that love away, because the love's always available. I had been experiencing many of these angels that I shared that often I wasn't sure if they're in a body or not. And at some point, I realized that my life is never, ever going to be the same again. I thought I was going to go back to my old life of marketing and remaking myself. And I realized it's never going to be the same again. And I decided that there were some support groups available for people that had had experiences and major illnesses and so forth. And I'd been invited to go check out this support group. So I realized I needed to talk with other people like me that had had their whole life pretty much devastated, or the life they knew devastated by illness and so forth. And many of those people are houseless. And, having these traumatic, life-changing illness experiences, many people lose everything that once meant something for them. So I was getting ready to go to this support group, that I realized that not only did I need to go for myself, but I realized that I'd had this amazing experience, and I was so grateful and lucky. And I knew that I had this bigger purpose beyond anything that I'd thought of before. So I had been studying A Course in Miracles for many years before. And it wasn't until this NDE experience that I experienced all of the principles of the Course to be true in an instant. And, the unconditional love and these false beliefs that we have that prevent us from feeling that love, the miracles available to us, the power of forgiveness, and that there really is nothing to forgive. It's all an illusion that we perceive things that have been done wrong to us, when in actuality that is not the case. So as I go down, and the medical transport is I'm waiting for that, and I realized I am loved regardless of my degrees, which mean nothing. I am loved, and I don't have to do anything to be worthy of that love. So I was getting ready, waiting for the van to come. And I was guided to this Course in Miracles prayer that's called Truly Helpful. And the prayer says, and this is what I said, and I had my walker and I'm looking down, and I just knew that what I have seen and what I've experienced and the grace of God, that I'm supposed to share it somehow. And so this prayer came to me, which is, of course, Miracles prayer, and I said it out loud. I am here only to be truly helpful. I am here to represent him who sent me. I do not have to worry about what to say or what to do, because he who sent me will direct me. I am content to be wherever he wishes, knowing he goes there with me. I will be healed as I let him teach me to heal. So we went to this support group, but I still had a little bit of separation feelings and second guessing myself. What am I doing? And feeling this separation. So I was kind of judging these other people with these experiences. I went in this support group, and all of a sudden my mother says, "You are them." And I saw then how connected we all are. And through this subsequent relationships with these people, I started literally realizing that angels of God are in these battered and bruised bodies of people that have had undeniable, horrific things happen to them. Yet these people were being my teachers. As I was encountering what I believe were angels in human form, and the most beautiful people who had lost everything physically, financially, yet there was so much love in them, I started to see the whole world differently. And for the first time, and I remember telling my sisters and so forth, these people don't know anything about me. They don't know about the degrees that I had or have, and the money I used to have, and the things that they just love me for being for me. And it was the first time that I got to experience and to see our worthiness and my worthiness just for being who I am. I didn't need to do anything to earn it. Whereas in the past, I had believed that I needed to earn it. So I had started doing these spiritual book studies, and one of the things that I knew, that I knew right away, I needed to get back to A Course in Miracles study groups. And so I started studying different spiritual book studies, and I continued going to these support groups for people that had had these experiences. And I was in this group of like 20 people, and it was a support sharing group. And this African-American guy that I had never seen before, he wasn't even supposed to be there, theoretically. He came and he starts talking to this group. And to the world, he's going to look like a houseless person with skin issues and all this stuff. But he's talking to the group. And at the same time he's talking to the group, he's communicating with me. And I literally, I remember thinking, are you talking to me? And as he kept talking to the other people, he'd nod his head. Yes, I am. And it was blowing my mind. So after this group, I had to know this guy further. So I ended up spending the next several hours walking around downtown Honolulu with this man who I had to actually pinch a few times to make sure he was real, because he started saying stuff like, "You have been praying so hard, and I'm here to let you know that your prayers are being heard. And I'm here to let you know that." He then proceeded to tell me stuff that only me and God know. And certain things that I even needed to do. And the more that he said what I needed to do, the more that I knew I am talking with somebody above an angel. It's the closest intermediary with God. Who is that? For me, Jesus. And the love felt from this man who could go in and out of his lower self to appear to the world to be this downtrodden, homeless man, houseless. And then he could go right into his higher self. And the Son of God is talking to me. And he is telling me stuff like, you need to tell your story. You're going to be leading these groups of people that have had experiences like yours. And the more he said it, it was so bizarre because I knew deep down that I am supposed to be telling my story and doing exactly what he was saying. But the small me, like, no, I do not want to do that. So I got to spend this day, or at least half the day, with this guy walking around Honolulu. And he could go, like I said, 1 minute I am talking to the Son of God. The next minute we went into a Walmart and he's talking to a salesperson, and he's just any everyday person. So I won't go into everything that he told me, but the main things that he kept saying is that I'm supposed to be leading these groups and sharing my story. So I continued with my spiritual book studies. And at some point I realized my life is never going to be the same. And even in these spiritual book studies, these people, they want to have these experiences, but they haven't had them. And they also haven't left their body. They haven't died and come back. And so that's when something prompted me to Google after effects of near-death experiences, because I started realizing this is what I'd had, and without knowing really anything. So I Googled it and I found some studies, and they listed the after effects. Every single one of them I had. And so I realized I had to talk to other near-death experiencers. And that's when I formed this little group here on Oahu. And there was like 4 or 5 of us the first time. And we had a few sharing groups. And I didn't even share my story till about the 3rd time. And it was interesting because I couldn't share a whole lot of it without breaking down in tears, because the love that is available to us, that I was connecting to, it's so powerful, I couldn't even speak about it. And it took me another year or so to really speak about it. But I started these sharing groups, and COVID came along, and we ended up becoming Hawaiian IANDS. And what went from 5 people, we now have thousands of members all over the world. And I have several Facebook groups for near-death experiencers and people that want to know more about life after death, that I think we have now about 260,000 members in our groups. So I'm continually trying to integrate and learn from these experiences. But the biggest honor that I have is holding these sharing groups, because what I realize is that as I'm healing myself, others are being healed, and we're healing each other. And so I have slowly stepped into my purpose, which is helping other experiencers make sense of what they have gone through.